The concept of the self is a fundamental part of human experience and has been explored in various ways throughout history and across cultures. In Eastern cultures, the self is often understood in relation to the community and the collective, whereas in Western cultures, the self is often understood as an individual entity. In Eastern cultures, the self is seen as interconnected with the community and the collective. This is reflected in concepts such as collectivism, which emphasizes the importance of the group over the individual. In contrast, the Western concept of the self is often seen as an individual entity, separate from the community and the collective. This is reflected in concepts such as individualism, which emphasizes the importance of the individual over the group. An individualistic concept of the self is also reflected in the individual's sense of autonomy, which is the belief that an individual has control over the course of their own life. This notion of autonomy has been emphasized in Western cultures and has been seen as a source of strength and resilience. Consider these books which emphasize the importance of autonomy, such as The Power of One, Walden, Leaves of Grass, and The Alchemist, which involve individuals overcoming challenges and hardships while relying on their own self-determination. On the other hand, in Eastern cultures the concept of the self is often seen in relation to the community and the collective. This is reflected in concepts such as collectivism, which emphasizes the importance of the group over the individual. In this context, autonomy is not seen as a source of strength, but rather as a source of weakness and vulnerability. In Eastern cultures, the self is often understood in terms of relationships, such as the relationship between the individual and the community, or the relationship between the individual and the natural world. This is reflected in concepts such as interdependence, which emphasizes the interconnectedness of all things. In contrast, the Western concept of the self is often seen as independent, separate from other people and the natural world. Eastern concepts of the self are represented in books such as The Odyssey, which emphasizes the importance of relationships, and The Art of War, which emphasizes the importance of group dynamics. Each of these stories involve individuals who are part of a larger context that shapes their identity. In this way, Eastern concepts of the self emphasize the interconnectedness of all things and the importance of relationships. Although there are differences between Eastern and Western concepts of the self, it is important to remember that both cultures have contributed to our understanding of the self. In Eastern culture, the self is often understood in terms of spiritual and religious beliefs. These beliefs often involve the idea of the self being part of something greater than the individual. On the other hand, Western culture focuses on the self in terms of materialism and the achievement of goals. In The Master and His Emissary, McGilchrist emphasizes this difference in the Western and Eastern concept of the self. He argues that the Western concept of the self is often too focused on the individual, while the Eastern concept of the self emphasizes the interconnectedness between the individual and the world. As he writes in his book, the East is still conscious of a sense of cosmic unity in which different elements are contained and related, whereas for us it is a matter of balance and harmony between separate parts. This dichotomy between East and West is an important reminder that understanding the self requires a balanced approach that incorporates both Eastern and Western perspectives. Ultimately, it is clear that there is a wide variety of interpretations of the self in both cultures, and that it is important to consider multiple perspectives in order to fully understand the nature of the self. In my book, The Dichotomy of the Self, I explore these differences in more depth, looking at how Eastern and Western cultures have understood the concept of the self throughout history and how these differences continue to shape our understanding of ourselves today.